The canyon closes in, its walls pinching the road to a single, unforgiving lane. No signs, no lights, just dust and the faint glint of basalt under the starlight. It feels wrong to be here, like the desert itself is watching, waiting for you to leave. A sedan creeps through Devil's Gate, headlights slicing the dark. The sky is a void, stars scattered like ash. No moon to betray what's coming. The driver's careful, scanning for the right spot. A ditch, a shadow, a place where the earth swallows secrets whole. The car slows, tires biting gravel, and then stops. Silence falls, heavy as a stone. A door creaks open. A dull thud hits the dirt, soft but final. The figure pauses, their breath barely audible. Maybe they look back, maybe they don't. Then the door slams, the engine growls to life, taillights flaring red. In moments, the car is gone, devoured by the canyon's twists and the Nevada night. Left behind, a young woman, face down in the sagebrush, her warmth fading into the cold desert wind. Time will pass before she's found, and even then, her name will stay a mystery. Hey Angela, how's the day treating you so far?
It's getting better.
What is good?
It was great this morning. It's getting better.
I can definitely relate to that. This has not been one of my best days either.
It's always a Tuesday. It's always a Tuesday.
I thought it was a Monday. I thought it was supposed to be Mondays. I thought by now we're supposed to be over it.
It's the second Monday of the week.
This is the second Monday of the week. Yes, that makes sense.
But it's my first Monday of this week.
That's right, because you had a long weekend.
I did. And
I'm jealous.
Took some time, did no things.
That's good.
Well, I did some things, but
that's what it's supposed to be when you take days off.
Not worth writing home about.
Well, are you ready to dive into this one?
I think so.
You think so? You're not sure?
I'm never 100% sure of anything.
All right, well, let's see how it goes.
Well, let's do it.
So this case feels like it's etched deep in the Nevada desert. It's raw and unyielding.
Devil's Gate isn't just a spot on a map. It's got a presence. Those cliffs, that eerie quiet. It's like the canyon's guarding something dark. Her story sticks with you, hard to shake.
That's why we're diving into these forgotten cases, pulling truths out of the shadows. Elko County's vastness buries stories like hers.
Yeah, and the land itself tells a piece of it. Flying over wells, it's all sagebrush and lonely roads stretching to nowhere. Chilling to think how she was out there, lost to time.
Yeah. So welcome, listeners, to Dark Dialogue, Rocky Mountain Reckoning, where we give voice to true crime's lost stories, cases that linger, demanding answers. I'm your guide through the forensics, timelines, and the questions that keep us up at night.
Don't forget the percentages.
And the percentages.
And I'm here to paint the places where these tragedies hit. Barren canyons, windswept highways, places like Devil's Gate where sorrow settles and secrets hide.
Tonight, we're back in rural Elko County, this time near Wells, where I-80 slices through sagebrush and stone. On October 2nd, 1972, a chucker hunter found Devil's Gate Jane Doe, a white female, 15 to 18 years old. Her partial skeletal remains scattered in a rural area near Devil's Gate. Her torso missing. Cause of death? Undetermined. Erased by desert decay or violence.
No ID, no belongings, no one to claim her. Just bones left to the wind, like she was meant to vanish.
She's Devil's Gate Jane Doe, a placeholder, not her life. A teenager whose story's been silent for over 5 decades. A presumed homicide in a land that holds its truths tight.
That silence cuts deep. A young girl's life reduced to a file, an unmarked grave. We're calling her Rachel until her true name comes to light.
Just like with Star Valley Jane Doe, we're giving her this episode. These cases, faded reports, whispers, aren't footnotes. Every victim gets her hour, her voice. We won't rush or blend her story. Rachel's trail is cold. No dental matches, no fingerprints, just fragments, but DNA could change that.
This place has its own voice too. Devil's Gate, 20 miles from Wells, is a windswept void, remote, unforgiving. Back in 72, it was a no man's land. No cameras, no witnesses. Whoever left her knew that silence would keep their secret.
Her killer bet no one would care. We're proving them wrong. Piecing her life from those bones, chasing justice through Elko's dust. Settle in, grab a drink, listen close. We're standing where the desert meets truth. Listeners, join our Adoptive Victim program at www.darkdialogue.com and help us fund DNA testing for cases like Rachel's through your support on Patreon and Ko-fi. Something big is coming. Stay tuned for our project to deepen this fight.
Share her story, keep her name alive, light a candle for her.
It's late, maybe 10:30. In a one-road town between Eli and Wells, a diner glows like a tired eye in the dark, the only light for miles. Inside, a teenage girl, 17, maybe younger, sits in a far booth, her back to the wall, eyes on the exit. Her hair's windblown, her jacket's thin. She hasn't ordered much, just toast, coffee, maybe to warm her hands more than to drink. The waitress, older, notices but doesn't ask. They've seen this before. Quiet girls passing through with nowhere to go, no one checking in. A notebook sits on the table. The pages blank. She flips one absently, but her mind's somewhere else. North, maybe, or west. A man walks in. Work boots, a baseball cap. Laughs easy with the cook. He nods to her, friendly, familiar, but her smile doesn't reach her eyes. They talk for a moment, nothing loud, no raised voices, just quiet words under the jukebox hum. Then she leaves her toast, half-eaten, scribbles something on the napkin, and follows him out. The waitress notices the crumpled bill left behind, barely enough for coffee. She picks up the napkin, but the ink's smeared. Outside, a pickup rumbles to life. Its taillights cut briefly through the darkness before vanishing down the road. The booth cools, the coffee goes cold, and another name never makes it to the register.
Devil's Gate isn't a place you'd stumble upon. It's a faint mark on the map, a jagged canyon nestled in the Ruby Mountains shadow, 20 miles southeast of Wells, Nevada, where pavement crumbles into gravel and the world feels abandoned. Shaped by ancient floods and relentless winds, its rust-red basalt cliffs and weathered limestone tower over a narrow, twisting trail. In 1972, this was desolation at its peak. No signs, no lights, just a past that seemed to push you away. Locals call it the wind tunnel. Gusts roar through, tossing dust and tumbleweeds, or it's so still your breath feels too loud. Either way, it's a place that watches, uninviting. Elko County in 72 was a sprawling emptiness, covering 17,000 square miles, larger than some states. It housed just 18,000 people, mostly in Elko or Wells. Wells, the closest town, was a dot of 1,200 souls, miners, ranchers, railroad workers, with one diner and a bar for I-80's road-worn travelers. Devil's Gate, off a faint track from State Route 229 near I-80, was a forgotten edge, a path for truckers, drifters, and wanderers crossing Nevada's core. You didn't linger here. You moved on. Sheriff's deputies were stretched thin. A handful patrolled a region vast as a small nation. Devil's Gate saw no regular checks, too remote, too quiet, no cameras, no phones, only CB radios for ranchers and drivers. A cry here? The canyon drank it down. The land itself conceals. Crumbling ridges, volcanic stone, and sparse sagebrush mask what's left behind. The trail winds sharply, dusty in summer, slick in winter. Cell signals vanish past wells even today. In 72, you were alone with the wind and circling ravens. Devil's Gate carried an unease. Ranchers dodged it unless driving cattle. Hunters tracked game but called it off. The 1976 Elko Daily Free Press named it Ghost Ground. Shoshone elders spoke of spirits bound to the rock, their tales etched in the land's ancient veins. It's striking. Cliffs burning red at dusk, hidden springs tucked in stone. But its beauty feels like a snare, pulling you into its silent hold. Crime was scarce in Elko County. Murders were rare. Barroom brawls or family disputes solved quickly. Nevada's 1972 homicide rate was 5.6 per 1,000, mostly urban. A death in the canyon? Unheard of. The Shoshone, whose ancestral lands span this region, fought land right battles in 72. Their voices often sidelined in official logs. Their presence wove a rich thread through Elko, yet their stories, like many, faded in the cracks of history. This wasn't just remote. It was a world apart where secrets sank into the earth, waiting for someone to listen.
Midnight presses close, the desert air sharp and biting. A young woman, 15 to 18, slips into a gas station off I-80, her shadow fleeting under the buzzing light. Her steps are light, cautious, like she's used to moving unnoticed. No bag, no ID, just a figure passing through, maybe hitching a ride, maybe running from something. Dust clings to her shoes, traces of roads left behind. She nods to the clerk. Quick, quiet, routine. Coins scraped together for a soda, maybe a candy bar. Enough for now. Always just enough. Outside, a car idles, tucked in the lot's dark corner. Not family, not a friend, just someone. A driver who offered a lift east. Words smooth, smile easy. She hesitates, then slides into the passenger seat. No questions about the next stop. No sense of the end coming. The door thuds shut. The engine hums, tires grinding gravel, fading into the Nevada night. She dreams of a new start, not an ending, but the road ahead leads to Devil's Gate. Her name's Blank, a void no one's filled. No family came forward, no missing report matches, but she was real. A person, not a case number. From the fragments we have, let's build a story to hold her memory. Let's call her Rachel. Not her name, but one with weight, one to say aloud.
We don't know her life, so how do you shape her story? Like with Star Valley Jane Doe?
Exactly. Rachel's past is a mystery, but forensic victimology gives us clues. Using 1970s patterns, we can sketch her likely path. Careful guesses, grounded in the era's realities, not pure fiction.
All right, John, tell us more about Rachel.
All right. Like I said, she was between 15 and 18 years old and found in rural Elko County. Her partial remains scattered near Devil's Gate in 1972. No trauma marks the bones that we have. No belongings to trace her. Picture a small town, maybe rural Utah, Wyoming, or northern Nevada, where fields and prairies stretch wide and life moves slow. Her family might have been modest. farmers, shopkeepers, or mill workers scraping by. She could have grown up feeding chickens, reading by lamplight, or sharing secrets with a best friend under starlit skies. The 70s were restless. FBI data from the era shows thousands of young women left home early, runaways chasing freedom or fleeing pain. Rachel might have felt her world closing in, maybe a family fight, a broken heart, or a town too small for her dreams pushed her out. She could have packed a small bag, thumbed a ride on I-80, her smile cautious but hopeful. Hitchhiking was common then. Highways buzzed with truckers, travelers, and loners. Most rides were safe. Hers wasn't. She likely wasn't local. No one in Elko knew her. No missing reports surfaced. NamUs lists her as a possible transient. Maybe a girl drifting through, trusting a stranger's offer. Her youth made her vulnerable, alone, no safety net, and far from home. She might have stopped at a diner, counting coins for coffee, eyes scanning for a kind face. No scars or tattoos were noted, suggesting a life without long-term hardship. But her story's gaps haunt us. Was she running to something? A new start? A distant relative? Or running from something darker? A home that wasn't safe? We don't know. But she laughed. She dreamed. Carried hopes, now lost. Her end came near Devil's Gate. Her remains left in a rural expanse. Whether by violence or desert's toll, she was scattered, unclaimed. The killer thought her anonymity would shield him. He counted on silence.
That absence, the lack of her name, it's what drives this, isn't it?
It is. Her vulnerability wasn't her fault. It was the era, the highway, the predator who crossed her path. Rachel was forging a life, however brief. Tonight, we lend her a voice. Even if the name Rachel is borrowed, we break the silence that he banked on. Next, we'll walk the scene where her remains were found, what the desert holds, what it hides, and what it tells us about her killer. Cold trails still whisper truth. It's October 2nd, 1972. Breaks crisp and clear, the sun barely cresting the Ruby Mountains. A chucker hunter treads a faint trail near Devil's Gate, shotgun slung, eyes scanning for game. The canyon's quiet, save for the wind's restless murmur and the skitter of pebbles underfoot. Something catches his gaze, a pale glint among the sagebrush. Out of place in the rust-red earth, he steps closer, breath catching. Not a deer bone, not a coyote's leavings. A human skull, weathered, staring blankly. Nearby, scattered bones gleam. No torso among them, no clothes, no bag, just fragments in a rural expanse, as if the desert tried to claim her whole. His pulse quickens. This isn't a hunt anymore. He marks the spot, sagebrush swaying like silent witnesses, and heads for Wells to call the sheriff. The canyon holds its breath, guarding her secrets still. Months, maybe years, she's waited here, unnoticed. Her story, her name, gone for now. But the desert silence is broken. Her presence, undeniable. On October 2nd, 1972, a chucker hunter's call puts Elko County deputies to Devil's Gate. They find a white female, 15 to 18, her partial skeletal remains, a skull, some scattered bones, no torso, spread across a rural expanse. No clothes, no ID, nothing to name her. The scene's quiet, eerie, like the canyon's daring them to dig deeper.
A teenager's bones in the middle of nowhere? What did the sheriff's office do with that?
Well, They started small, lean. Elko's county sheriff, as we talked about in the Starred Valley case, had maybe a dozen deputies for 17,000 square miles. Again, an area bigger than Maryland. No forensics lab, no big city budget. They cordoned off the area, photographed the bones, and bagged what they could. Namath says the remains were weathered, likely exposed between 6 and 24 months, pointing to a death in 71 or maybe early 72. Scavengers or dismemberment scattered her, but no trauma showed on what was left. And the cause of death? Undetermined. Deputies canvassed wells. Population, like you told us, only 1,200. And they asked ranchers, diner workers, barflies if they'd seen a young girl. Nothing. No missing reports matched. They check I-80 truck stops, motels, even Shoshone communities, and zip. The Elko Daily Free Press ran a short piece entitled Unidentified Remains Found, but no tips followed.
None at all? How does a kid vanish like that?
You know, the 70s were a blind spot. There was no NamUs, no DNA databases, no CODIS. Dental records were sent to Reno, but without a missing person to compare, they just sat there. Fingerprinting was useless on bones. The sheriff's office had Polaroids, sketches, and guesses. They figured that she was a transient, maybe a runaway hitching through. FBI stats from 72 show 60,000 missing kids every year. Many never traced. I mean, you know, this is just shortly after the big summer of love and the hippie movement. I mean, in 1967, 100,000 kids went to San Francisco.
I can't even. 60,000 kids.
A year. 60,000 a year. And that had been going on since, 65, 66. So it was definitely a different time. You know, kids were leaving home in droves, heading to this enlightenment that they were going to get in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. And, you know, hitchhiking was the way a lot of them got there. We don't know for sure that that's where she was headed, but we do know that's what kids were doing in this period of time, and a lot of kids. So Devil's Gate was 20 miles from Wells, off a back road, no witnesses, no tire tracks that were preserved because she was found so much after she was dumped out there, no physical evidence beyond the bones. They pushed what they had. A deputy drove to Salt Lake, checking shelters, bus stations. Another hit Reno's casinos, showing sketches. Nada. By 73, the case was shelved. Not closed, just cold. Deputies had cattle thefts, bar fights, and that county to patrol. Resources dried up.
So that's it. Her case just faded?
Not entirely. A coroner kept her file alive, refiling it yearly. Locals whispered about the, quote, Canyon Girl, but without a name, it stalled. Modern tools could crack it. Author's DNA sequencing can pull profiles from old bones, like in Boulder City's 1980 Jane Doe, which was solved in 2023. Isotopes could trace her hometown, maybe Utah or Idaho. But NamUs lists her as 11310, and she's still waiting for a match. The killer banked on Elko's vastness, on her body, on her being nobody's daughter. He didn't count on today, on us, on technology, on perseverance. Next, we're going to explore who she might have crossed paths with, what shadows moved along I-80, and why her silence endures. She's 15, maybe 18, curled in the passenger seat. The road a blur of heat and asphalt. The driver's a stranger, met at a gas station off I-80. Easy talk, a quick smile, a ride offered. Seemed safe enough. Now the radio's whine scratches her nerves. His glances drift, too long, too sharp. The smile's gone, eyes flat as the horizon. She asks how far to Wales. Soon, he mutters, but the land's empty. No signs, no lights, just basalt cliffs knifing the sky. The air shifts, heavy, wrong. Her fingers graze the door handle, a reflex, a hope. The car veers, turn signal snapping like a warning. Gravel crunches as pavement fades, a side road swallowing them. He mumbles about a shortcut. Her pulse spikes. She knows it's a lie. Silence presses in, thicker than the wind. She could speak, demand that he stop, but his hands grip the wheel, unyielding. The canyon looms closer, its shadows deep. She's slipping towards Devil's Gate, toward an end she can't yet name. Devil's Gate Jane Doe's case sat cold for decades. Her partial remains, the skull, scattered bones, the lack of a torso, locked in an Elko County evidence vault. They were found on October 2nd, 72 by that chucker hunter, and she was between 15 and 18. She was white, but no ID, no clues to her name. But today, science offers a path to answer where 1972's limits failed.
So how can we solve a case this old with so little left?
Well, modern forensics is a game changer. NamUs number 11310 lists her bones as viable for DNA extraction. Labs, like I said, like Othram, which solved the Boulder City's Jane Doe case, use forensic-grade genome sequencing to pull profiles from degraded samples. A simple bone fragment could yield her identity, or her killers. Isotopes in her teeth could map her origins to, Idaho, Wyoming, Oregon, areas with transient patterns in the 70s. Unlike 1972's dead-end dental records, today's genealogical databases like GEDmatch can link DNA to distant cousins. Elko's cold case unit, revived in 2018, dusted off her file. They entered her into NamUs in 2008, cross-checking missing persons nationwide. No match yet, but volunteers scour records, chasing leads from Reno to Salt Lake. In 2024, artist Lily Lee placed a memorial marker near Devil's Gate, sparking local vigils and tips to the sheriff's tip line.
Well, that's powerful, but what's holding it back?
Money and time. DNA testing costs thousands. Othram's work often needs crowdfunding. Elko's budget is tight, prioritizing active cases. Her bones, weathered by 6 to 24 months exposure, yield less DNA than fresh samples. Scavenger activity or dismemberment complicates things. No torso, no soft tissue. And her transient profile means no local roots to trace. FBI data shows 30% of 1970s missing teens were never reported, lost in the era's chaos. Still, hope persists. The Doe Network and Unidentified Awareness push her case online, sharing sketches and details. A 2023 Elko Daily Press feature renewed calls for tips. Social media, like X-posts from advocates, keeps her story alive. One match, a cousin, a sibling, could break it all open. Compare her to Star Valley Jane Doe. Same county, same year. Yet her bullet wound gave clearer leads. Rachel's case with no trauma leans a lot harder on DNA.
It feels so close, but yet so far. So what's the next step?
Funding her DNA test is key. Programs like our Adoptive Victim Program could cover it. If her profile hits a familial match, she's no longer a Jane Doe. Her killer, thinking the desert erased her, didn't count on 2025's tech. Next, we weigh the theories. Who crossed her path? Why her silence lingers? And what justice might look like. Twilight bleeds across the Nevada sky, painting the basalt cliffs near Devil's Gate in fading gold. The girl, 15 to 18, sits on a roadside boulder off I-80, knees drawn up, no bag or belongings, just her, small against the vastness. The air's cooling fast, desert chill creeping in. She's alone, maybe dropped off, maybe waiting for a ride that hasn't come. Her eyes trace the horizon, searching for headlights, a way out. She's been moving, hitching, drifting, chasing something better than what she left behind. A fleeting calm settles, her breath steady, misting in the dusk. She doesn't know the next car will change everything, doesn't sense the shadow waiting near the road. The canyon looms behind her, silent, unyielding, its cliffs swallowing the last light. She shifts, brushing dust from her hands, ready to stand, to keep going. But this moment, her pause, her hope, slips away, fragile as the fading sky. Devil's Gate is close now, its quiet pull inescapable. So we begin with her life, not her death. Devil's Gate Jane Doe, found in 72, left only fragments, a skull, scattered bones, but no torso. And out there in Elko County, Nevada, those remains whisper who she was, who silenced her. FBI victimology and behavioral profiling let us see Rachel, a name we lend her until hers is known, not just a case file.
With so little evidence, how do you rebuild her story?
The FBI's behavioral analysis framework starts with fact. So her NamUs profile lists her as 15 to 18. We know she was white, and there's no trauma on her bones. But we also have no ID, almost no belongings. She wasn't from Elko. We know that. The 1970s were a crucible of change, a time, like we said, where youth was wandering all over the country. So, imagine that small town that we talked about her coming from and her modest family, most likely, but we don't know what broke. We don't know if there was a family rift, a love lost. Maybe the town was just too damn small and she was too damn ambitious. The 1960s counterculture was still alive in 72, and it fueled this exodus. Like I mentioned before, Haight-Ashbury's 1967 Summer of Love drew 100,000 youths to San Francisco. Most of them hitchhiked. By 72, that wanderlust persisted. Kids hit the road, seeking freedom or escape. Women's liberation was rising, but so were the risks. FBI crime stats show a 71% spike in prostitution between 1960 and 1970, reflecting more women on the highways. Rachel wasn't likely involved. Her remains showed no chronic trauma, but her youth placed her in danger's path. Hitchhiking along I-80 was routine, a lifeline for the rootless. She might have stood at a gas station, thumb raised, a light bag at her feet, trusting a stranger's smile. No belongings were found, suggesting that she traveled lean, maybe with a small pack, now lost. Her anonymity, estranged, runaway, or a drifter, made her untraceable, the perfect target. The FBI's high-risk category fits her, isolated by circumstance, not by choice. A teenage girl at a midnight rest stop, no one waiting, no ID. She's who predators seek. Her vulnerability wasn't necessarily her fault. It was the era's chaos, the highway's pull, the solitude that cloaked her. She could have chased Reno's lights, Salt Lake's promise, or fled a home that wasn't safe. Her spark is lost, but she had one. It's now buried in Devil's Gate silence. The 1970s highway culture was a double-edged sword. I-80 buzzed with life. Truckers, travelers, dreamers, but also danger. The FBI's 1972 Uniform Crime Report notes a rise in stranger-on-stranger violence in transient hubs. Rachel's youth made her a mark, her anonymity a shield for her killer. She wasn't alone in this fate. The Doe Network lists similar cases across the Great Basin. Women between 15 to 25 found in remote areas. No names, no justice. Thousand Springs Jane Doe found in 74 mirrors Rachel. Youthful, transient, scattered remains, no identity. These cases weave a grim tapestry of predation along Western highways where anonymity was both a lure and a trap. Rachel's profile screams vulnerability. She likely moved through transient spaces, diners, rest stops, gas stations, where eyes glanced but didn't linger. Her lack of local ties suggests she was far from home, maybe estranged, maybe chasing a new start. FBI victimology emphasizes context, her age, her solitude, her mobility. She wasn't reckless. She was young, navigating a world that offered freedom but hid predators. Her story echoes others. Girls who left home, trusting the road, only to vanish into its shadows.
That's just so heartbreaking. A kid so alone. Who saw her as prey?
So, the killer's profile points to a male between the ages of 20 and 40 in 1972. And that's right out of the FBI's crime classification manual. He knew Devil's Gate seclusion, 20 miles from Wells, off a back road, no burial, just scattered remains suggest haste, maybe even panic or arrogance. No trauma on her bones hints at possible strangulation, smothering, or an overdose. Methods leaving no skeletal scars. Common in opportunistic crimes. Scavenger activity or dismemberment scattered her even further, erasing traces. He's likely a transient, a trucker, a drifter, or a local with rural access, like a ranch hand, a miner, or a seasonal worker. His motive? Opportunity, control, or impulse. He chose Rachel for her anonymity, a girl no one would miss. Contrast Star Valley Jane Doe, which same year, same county, she was shot, posed, deliberate. Rachel's killer was maybe a little less organized. Her disposal was quick, almost careless. He might have acted once, a crime of chance, or roamed I-80 like uncaught predators of the other 70s Jane Does, like the Thousand Springs Jane Doe. Found in 74, shares Rachel's fate, scattered, nameless, transients. FBI's VICAP profiles mark him as ordinary, the guy buying coffee at a diner, tipping coins, chatting weather. His ease was a mask, his approach calculated. Behavioral markers suggest control, not rage, methodical, not chaotic. FBI profiler John Douglas in Mindhunter describes such offenders as seeking dominance, targeting transient women. Rachel's youth fit his pattern. He likely approached her with charm, a ride offered, a kind word. FBI's 1970s offender studies note predators exploit trust, striking the untraceable. He planned enough to pick a remote site, but didn't linger to conceal. His confidence came from her anonymity. Elko's vastness of 17,000 square miles with just a dozen deputies, they were stretched thin. No witnesses, no cameras, just bones. The killer's psychology likely centers on power. Douglas notes these offenders thrive on control, choosing victims who won't be missed. Rachel's solitude was his opportunity. He might have killed before or again, blending into small-town routines. No CODIS hit exists, but DNA on her bones could name him. Great Basin cases mirror this pattern. Unidentified women, scattered remains, killers betting on silence. He could have been a loner, a trucker through Wales, or a local knowing every back road. His ordinariness is chilling. Someone who smiled, offered a soda, then erased a life. He didn't need a signature. Her anonymity was enough. He might have driven past Devil's Gate later, checking, or nodded to a trooper in Elko, no guilt. His confidence let him walk free. Regional cases suggest a pattern. Predators exploiting I-80's anonymity, targeting transient girls. The FBI's 1970s data shows a surge in highway-related abductions, with victims like Rachel vanishing into the vastness. Her killer thrived in that gap, where silence was his ally.
So how does he just vanish?
Elko's scale was his cloak. With no evidence beyond the bones, he slipped through. Rachel's lack of ID, her transient life, was his shield. He didn't bury her, the desert did. Other 70s cases, unidentified, scattered, show this pattern. Killers bet on silence, on cases fading. Profiling narrows the net. Her transient risk, his impulsive act, the canyon's quiet. So next we'll trace how Rachel's story echoes in Elko, how a Jane Doe's loss lingers, and what justice could mean for her. She's 15. Maybe 18, behind the counter of a diner like this, where coffee steams and truckers slouch at dawn. Her name tag reads Rachel, a borrowed name. She calls folks hun, her smile worn but warm. A faded photo of a sunset tucks into her apron. No one asks why she moves town to town. No one sees the shadow in her eyes. She fades into the hum of orders, taking up no space. One night, a man slides into her booth, orders coffee, black, asks where she's from. Around, she mutters, dodging his gaze. His eyes linger, sharp. His smile too tight. His lips heavy. Leaves slow. She clocks out, steps into the chill desert air. The night swallows her. Her absence stings only later, when no one recalls her face. I-80's ceaseless pulse hides more than it reveals. Growling engines, fleeting tire tracks, a driver's hands masking his haste. In 1972, Devil's Gate Road, a rugged gravel vein off I-80's shadow, stretched from Wells to Ely, a back road for locals, miners, and the occasional wanderer. Someone chose it, carrying Rachel to her end. No suspect stands clear, but vehicles linger in the case file, silent witnesses to her killer's path.
Hallways are voids. Strangers pass like ghosts, gone before you can blink.
Yeah, like we said, Rachel was only between 15 and 18. We know that she was a white woman, and she didn't walk to Devil's Gate. Her partial remains, the skull, the scattered bones, the lack of a torso, prove that she was driven there, her life erased. A vehicle was the killer's tool, a trap on wheels for a girl who trusted her ride. A rancher herding cattle 2 miles from the scene on BLM land spotted something odd at dusk. A dirty white station wagon, 2-door, no plates, parked near a gate known only to locals. No driver, no sounds, just a car out of place, its headlights off, blending into the fading light. Days later, he told a deputy canvassing for Rachel's case. The detail was scrawled in the report's margin, quote, older white station wagon, but never pursued. No make, no plates, as common as sagebrush in 72 Nevada.
Ghost car swallowed by the desert's memory. Why does this matter?
Well, because Rachel didn't drive herself, had no one waiting. A vehicle, car, truck, van, whatever, carried her to Devil's Gate. It's a window into the killer's mind. His mobility, his choice of a remote site reveals confidence, control. FBI's VICAP profile shows 70% of the 1970s highway crimes involve vehicles, pickups, vans, sedans, perfect for mobile predators. Organized killers use cars as weapons, luring victims from diners, truck stops, or pullouts. Once Rachel was inside, the vehicle became his stage, isolating her from the world. Devil's Gate Road feeds Nevada Route 93 to Elko and to I-80, a transient's haven, barely policed in 72. A killer could leave Wells at dawn, dump her remains, and cross into Utah by noon. Anonymity his shield. Elko County's 17,058 square miles overwhelmed its 12 deputies. A vast wilderness where clues vanish like dust. Nevada DMV records from 75 estimate 85,338 registered vehicles. Over a third were pickups, sedans, or wagons fit to conceal a body. Out-of-state plates from Utah, Idaho, or California rolled through unchecked, blending into the highway's pulse. The station wagon sightings haunts the case. Was it the killers, a locals, unrelated, or a drifters stolen for the act? In 72, vehicle tracking was a pipe dream. No VIN logs, no border checks. Plates could be swapped in minutes, cars ditched in ravines. FBI's 1970s crime data notes stolen cars were common in highway abductions, often stripped or repainted. Killers like Harvey Carrington, Keith Jesperson, and even Ted Bundy, with his swap Beetles, altered cars post-crime, leaving ghosts behind. If Rachel's killer did the same, that wagon's as lost as she is.
An unregistered car could have been anyone's, vanished without a trace.
Exactly. That's the pattern. Rachel's trust in him speaks to his ease. He seemed safe, offering a map, a story, a smile. His vehicle might have been unremarkable, a sedan, a pickup with a canopy, or the two-door wagon, plain but deadly. She climbed in, no struggle, no restraints. The crime was swift. She might have sensed nothing until it was too late. The vehicle's role is chilling. It wasn't just transport, it was control, mobility, escape. In 72, Elko's highways were lawless. Truckers, drifters, campers moved freely. In 1973, Elko Daily Free Press report lamented the county's understaffed sheriff, unable to patrol I-80's expanse. A killer could act at sunrise, his car's hum the only witness, and be 3 states away by dusk.
No one stopped him. No one even noticed.
The anonymity was his armor. Modern tools could have changed it. NamUs now links vehicle sightings to cases. AI sifts tolls, gas receipts, even faded reports. In 72, a station wagon raised no flags. Just another desert car, unremarkable until it wasn't. A single plate number, if caught, could have cracked it wide open. The car holds Rachel's final moments. The seat that she leaned into, the dash's hum, the gravel crunch as they turned into Devil's Gate. Its engine was her last sound, its wheels his escape. He drove on, unseen, leaving her scattered remains to the canyon's silence.
That car carried her trust, then her life, and no one saw it go.
It's a grim echo. The vehicle that vanished, like Rachel, leaving only questions. So next, we'll explore how her loss ripples through Elko, how a Jane Doe's echo shapes a community, and what justice could mean for her. Dusk paints Nevada's sky in bruised purples. Devil's Gate cliffs looming dark. The girl, 15 to 18, lingers by pull-off, I-80. Her shadow small against the vastness. Rachel, we call her. No bag, no ties, just a drifter's pause, her breath misting in the chill. She's been moving, hitching rides, chasing a spark beyond the horizon. Her eyes scan for headlights, a ride to somewhere new. A fleeting calm holds her, unaware that the next car will shift her path. The canyon waits, its silence heavy, pulling her closer. She brushes dust from her hands, ready to move on, not sensing the shadow trailing her steps. Her absence will echo later, when no one recalls her face. So on that October day in 72 in northern Nevada, a place where the desert has its own rhythm and its own silence, the heat scorches the sand during the day and the cold clutches the earth at night. Sagebrush bristles in the wind. Life, where it survives, clings close to the ground. It was in this harsh landscape, just southeast of a narrow, jagged passage called Devil's Gate, that a chucker hunter made a discovery that stopped him in his tracks. Bones scattered, weathered, bleached, a partial skeleton, no torso, a skull disconnected from the rest of the body, resting in the dust as if placed there deliberately by nature's cruel hand. The authorities were called and the investigation began, but it didn't last long and it didn't go far. The remains belonged to a teenage girl who was white, likely between 15 and 18. Her bones told little. Her name, never found. Her killer, never identified. Her story, fragmented by time, lost to the desert. So we decided to call her Rachel, our way of giving humanity back to someone long overlooked. Officially, she's known as NamUs case number UP11310, unidentified female, partial remains, Elko County, Nevada, discovered in the shadow of Devil's Gate.
It's such a haunting image, just a skull in the dirt, the rest of her gone, and nobody even knows who she was. How do you even begin to recover life from something like that?
Very carefully. And often not successfully. In 72, forensic science wasn't what it is today, especially not in rural Nevada. Like we've said, Elko County is massive, but back then it had just one full-time coroner, probably a local doctor with no formal forensic training, if that, because to become a coroner, you don't even have to be a doctor.
Yeah.
It's elected. It could be Bob, who runs the gas station, or Larry, the rancher from out of town.
Yep.
I mean, he might have had absolutely zero medical training. Crime scene protocol was minimal. There was no mobile lab, no dedicated evidence team, no CSI unit rolling up with tech and tools. The bones were collected, probably by hand, and brought to the local morgue. And then came the task of determining a cause of death, which proved nearly impossible. Rachel's skeleton had no trauma, no fractures, no bullet holes, no knife marks, no bludgeoning, no indication of what ended her life. At least not one that left an impression on her bones. The autopsy would have noted this in clinical language, something like skeletal remains, no signs of perimortem trauma, cause of death, undetermined. And when the coroner writes undetermined, the case stalls. Homicide becomes harder to prove. Resources become harder to justify. And unless a strong lead emerges, the file closes in everything but name. So let's talk about what Rachel's body could have told us if it had been found sooner. In the first 24 to 48 hours after death, a body begins to change rapidly. Rigor mortis sets in. Blood settles due to gravity. Internal bacteria begin breaking down tissue. Insects arrive. Blowflies are usually the first. They lay eggs in natural openings like the mouth, the eyes, the nose, the genital areas. And those eggs hatch into maggots within hours. The maggots feed, grow, and pupate in a predictable cycle. Under the right conditions, etymologists can calculate time of death within a window of a few hours to maybe a few days, but Rachel was discovered long after all of that was gone. In the Nevada high desert, exposure accelerates decomposition. The daytime heat can dry out soft tissue quickly, preserving it briefly in a mummified state, but scavengers like coyotes and fox don't wait. They tear flesh, drag bones. Nights in the 30s and 40s, slow microbial breakdown. While daytime temperatures can exceed 100 degrees, that constant temperature shift destroys biological clues. Skeletization can happen in as little as 10 days under harsh conditions, but Rachel's remains showed signs of much longer exposure. Experts believe she was in the desert between 6 and 24 months before being found. Experts believe she was in the desert between 6 and 24 months before being found. That's a hell of a wide range. And in forensic terms, it's nearly useless when trying to connect the dots to missing persons reports.
So she could have died in spring of 71 or even the fall of 72 and no one noticed.
Exactly. And remember, 72 was pre-internet, way before NamUs, way before any kind of national databases. Law enforcement agencies didn't talk to each other unless they had a reason to. If someone reported a missing teenager in Idaho or in Utah, that information didn't automatically get to Nevada. In fact, even between counties within the same state, reports were rarely shared unless foul play was suspected. And with Rachel, there wasn't enough evidence to scream murder, just body parts. No cause of death, no clothing, no personal items. She had a pair of shoes and the La Fisa. You ever heard of that?
No.
Neither had I. I researched the shit out of La Fisa shoes. And it's Lafisa. There is an Lafisa, Lafiza. And I thought that maybe I'd stumbled onto something. But when I researched the company, it was started like in 2000 or something. So these La Fisa shoes were described as clogs with 4-inch heels.
Interesting.
And very, very little else. And so, I mean, it makes it really difficult to trace anything, but it also really makes me think of Star Valley, because where did all our clothes go?
Yeah.
You know, we know Star Valley was laid out nude. There was no clothes around that body, and it wasn't as decomposed as this one. But, I mean, you know, the coyotes and stuff aren't carrying off clothes. They should have found other stuff in the area.
Yeah, at least not whole clothes. They'd leave bits and pieces of something.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder if her clothes were just never there. Very similar to Star Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And that opens a darker possibility. Someone intentionally removing her clothes, maybe to prevent identification, maybe because that's the MO that they're operating in. But without fibers, without remnants, without even a label fragment, we don't know. Fiber analysis, even if it was attempted in 72, was limited to basic microscopic comparisons, no advanced testing, no chemical tracing. And if fibers were collected, they may not have even survived. Rural evidence storage often meant cardboard boxes in a back closet, vulnerable to heat, moisture, rodents, and neglect.
What about dental records? You mentioned her teeth were intact.
Yeah, and that's one of the few advantages in this case. Teeth are durable. They survive when everything else is gone. Rachel had a full set of adult teeth with no fillings or crowns. That's not uncommon for a teenager, but it also made identification harder. No unique dental work, no braces, no surgical markers. If a dentist had submitted records for a missing patient, it could have helped, but again, no centralized database existed at the time. Matching had been done by hand. You needed to suspect who she was before you could even compare her records. As far as we know, no match was ever made. Her teeth were charted, her file was shelved, and Rachel disappeared again, but this time into bureaucracy. So, where does all that leave us? In 72, Elko County had minimal investigative capacity. Like we said, one coroner, no lab, no forensic anthropologist. The bones were examined, logged, and stored, maybe. Some rural counties cremated unclaimed remains after 5 years. Others buried them in paupers' graves, marked only by case numbers or nothing at all. If Rachel's bones still exist, they may be in a county storage room, a university lab, or a private mortuary archive, but there's no public record of where. And without those remains, modern forensics can't help.
But say we did have those remains, what could we do now?
Quite a bit. Modern forensic genealogy has changed the game. Even degraded bone can yield DNA. With advanced sequencing, we could upload or profile the GEDmatch or family tree DNA, and if even one distant cousin is in the system, genealogists can build a family tree, identify likely matches, and hand investigators a list of potential names. We could also use isotope testing by analyzing the oxygen and the strontium isotopes in her teeth. We could identify where she grew up. Specific water sources leave chemical signature in bones. We might find that Rachel drank mountain runoff in Montana or well water in central Utah. That narrows the field. Facial reconstruction has also evolved. CT scanning allows for incredibly accurate skull modeling. Software can reconstruct soft tissue, generate a probable face, and even account for age and weight. That image could be distributed nationally in seconds. But again, without her remains, we're stuck.
And what about her file? Is that even accessible?
Possibly, if someone knows where to look. In many counties, old records are buried in storage, mislabeled, misfiled, or completely forgotten. Her case might just be listed as Jane Doe 1972, or Elko unidentified, or something even more cryptic. There may be no digital record. It might take physically opening boxes and flipping through folders. That's what cold case units do when they have time and money, which unfortunately they often don't. Nevada's cold case resources are limited. Rural counties rely heavily on state grants, and with newer homicides and active threats on the table, a 50-year-old Jane Doe with no DNA doesn't exactly climb to the top of the priority list. Rachel's silence is more than biological. It's systemic, a collision of environmental exposure, historical forensic limitations, and bureaucratic decay. She wasn't just failed by her killer. She was failed by the era, the process, and the structure meant to find justice.
And yet she's still here. Her case still exists, even if just in whispers.
Exactly. Someone could still remember. A family member might still wonder what happened to their cousin, their sister, their friend. Maybe someone remembers a teenage girl who vanished in the early 1970s, and they were told that she ran away or overdosed or simply left home. Sometimes a memory paired with a name is all it takes to reopen a file. But until then, Rachel waits, not for justice, but for identity.
Rachel didn't just die alone. She died outside a system never designed to see her. Not in life, and certainly not in death.
That's the raw truth. If she'd been found in Reno, maybe someone would have listened. A purse might have yielded ID. A tattoo might have sparked a memory. The press might have stirred something. But Rachel wasn't in Reno. She was found near Devil's Gate, far from city headlines. No wallet, no name, no nearby witnesses, just bones. She became a case number, offline, unlinked, unread, a girl without paperwork in a place built to bury stories in silence. And that silence wasn't just environmental, it was systemic. Here's the lowest point. Rachel wasn't just a victim of a crime. She was lost to forensic neglect, to underfunded rural offices, to lost files and buried remains, to 5 decades of waiting. But we're here now, telling her story out loud, saying her name, even if it's one that we gave her, because someone might remember her face or the man who left her in the dust. We may not know her name, her birthplace, the people she loved, or the ones she feared. We don't have her social security number. We don't have a yearbook photo. We don't have a missing persons report with her smile on it. But we do have something. No certainties, but fragments, possibilities, patterns, her bones, her environment, the path she may have taken, the silence that followed. Let's sketch who Rachel might have been, not through confirmed facts, but through what we do know and what the landscape of 1972 can tell us. What we know from the forensic estimates is that she was a female. She's aged between 15 and 18. She's white. She's between 5'2" and 5'6", of medium build. No signs of pregnancy or childbirth. Her hair color was likely brown to light brown. The length was unknown. No tattoos or major scars that we know of. Most of the clothing was absent. We have those 4-inch La Fisa clogs, whatever the hell they are.
All right.
Her remains were found in an advanced decomposition, weeks, possibly months exposed. The heat, the wind, and the scavengers did their work. There was no clothing left, really, to name that would identify an era or a style. No bag, just skeletal remains, disconnected and silent. The estimated time of death is vague, possibly between early spring and late fall of 72. That gives us about a 9-month window in a landscape where even a week can erase everything. So 1972 wasn't an easy time to be a young woman, especially in rural or isolated areas. Economic hardship hit mining towns hard. Jobs were transient, seasonal, temporary. Women took whatever work was available, cleaning motels, waitressing at truck stops, helping harvest crops on ranches. Many moved town to town, often hitchhiking when buses or trains didn't reach the smaller communities. Nevada was particularly risky. Vast distances, few patrols, little oversight. Feminism was rising, but safety nets were rare. Runaway teens and displaced women were common. So were predators, especially on the highways. A woman like Rachel could vanish completely. No credit card trail, no cell phone, no public records if she hadn't rented or worked on the books. If no one filed a report, she was invisible.
And even if someone did file one, it wouldn't have reached Elko County. The systems didn't talk to each other. There was no way to know if a missing girl in Utah had ended up in Nevada.
That's exactly right. And we keep saying that she could have come from Montana or Oregon or Idaho or Utah, whatever, but she could have just as easily come from New York or New Hampshire or southern Florida. So she could have come from somewhere in the region, but she could have come from
anywhere.
For that matter, she could have come from freaking Germany.
Yeah.
You know? So, what might Rachel's life have looked like before the end? We consider three primary theories based on forensics, location, and similar survival accounts. So, maybe a seasonal worker or migrant. In the early 1970s Nevada, transient labor was common. Women often traveled alongside male partners for work or alone. She may have worked in Ely or Baker or Wells. She may have been en route to Reno or to Vegas. She may have hitchhiked and accepted a ride that turned fatal. These women lived out of motels or cars. They often didn't carry IDs or they had them stolen. Without stable addresses or relatives nearby, they vanished quickly and were rarely reported. Or she was a runaway or a displaced youth. Runaway rates among teen girls spiked in the 1970s, driven by abuse, rebellion, drug use, or strained home lives. Rachel could have fled a family in California or Idaho or Utah or anywhere else for that matter. She may have been headed towards a sibling, a boyfriend, or a commune. Devil's Gate and surrounding regions were known to attract hippie drifters. She may have chosen to disappear, but she never reached her destination. And 3, she could have been a sex trafficking victim. That's harder to prove, but it's not impossible. Nevada's highways were known corridors for sex work and for trafficking, legal and otherwise. Brothels operated along remote stretches. Women were sometimes coerced or transported across county lines. Some Jane Does found in similar conditions were likely sex workers or victims of trafficking, especially those found unclothed or far from population centers. Rachel's isolated location, no nearby residences, no road markers, fits a dump site rather than a natural death location. Rachel's absence speaks volumes. She had no bag, no purse, no wallet, no keepsakes, no identification, no medical devices, no traceable belongings. These things could have been stolen or stripped post-mortem, or maybe she simply traveled light, trusting the ride she accepted, never expecting what followed. She had no visible dental work, no records matched her teeth. That suggests maybe poverty, maybe just inconsistent medical care, a drifting life, or someone just starting adulthood. So Devil's Gate sits near some key western routes. So she may have traveled south on US 93, passing Wells, Ely, and Baker, or west on I-80 towards Reno, north from Las Vegas, or east from Winnemucca. Her body was found miles from any major intersection, far from any surveillance or bystanders. She moved unseen, or someone ensured she would never be seen again. To understand her risk, we studied other cases of women who survived similar attacks in the region during the 1970s. So all of these gave fictitious names. So we'll just refer to them as the names that they give. So one was Gina, age 22 in 1977 in Ely. And she was assaulted by a man posing as a cop. She jumped from his truck and survived. No charges were filed. And then we have Dina, age 19 in 1979 in Piach, strangled by a trucker, and she lived. He walked free due to a lack of evidence. Then we have Michelle, age 25 and 72 in Las Vegas. She was drugged, abducted after a bar shift, and dumped near Crystal Springs. That case went cold. Each of these women narrowly escaped predators. Each was met with disbelief or institutional indifference. Each could have been Rachel. They survived. She didn't. So let's be honest. Rachel wasn't a runaway in the romantic sense. She wasn't a statistic. She was a person, young, way under 30, probably not even 20. She may have had strained family ties or no ties at all. She may have left by choice or been taken by force. She may have hoped for freedom. Instead, she found a canyon. She didn't leave a missing persons report that we can find. That doesn't mean that she wasn't missed. She was someone. She had a name. She had a laugh, a favorite place, someone that she trusted. Somewhere, someone might still be waiting, not knowing her story ends in a place called Devil's Gate.
That's why we say her name, even if it's borrowed. Jane Doe isn't her name. It's a marker, a symbol of unfinished justice. We tell her story not just to remember, but to challenge silence, to push back against a system that fails women like her.
There's one question that always lingers in the quiet space after a case like Rachel's. Was she alone? Or was someone stalking this region again and again, preying on women like her along these empty roads under the vast Nevada sky? We've talked about her as one loss. Now we zoom out, because Devil's Gate isn't just a dot on a map. It sits inside a broader pattern, one that from the late 1960s through the early 1990s turned parts of Nevada into a corridor of unspoken fear, a corridor where women vanished and predators thrived. Start with the geography. US 93, known as the Great Basin Highway, runs nearly 1,300 miles, cutting a hard line from Wickenburg, Arizona, through Nevada, and all the way to the Canadian border in Montana. Through the Great Basin, its remote, harsh, often unpaved stretches during the 70s. In this part of Nevada, US 93 crosses with another ominous route, US 50, called the loneliest road in America by Life magazine in 1986, and for good reason. In the 1970s, hitchhiking was at its peak. Long-haul trucking surged across the Intermountain West. Gas stations and motels were sparse. Patrol coverage, minimal. It was the perfect storm, a landscape too vast to police, a culture that trusted strangers, and a lack of forensic or technological oversight to catch those who took advantage of both. For women traveling alone, especially runaways, drifters, or seasonal workers, it was fertile ground for danger. For killers, it was a near-perfect hunting ground. We call it the Highway of Death, not because the state meant harm, but because no one was watching closely, not enough to stop what was happening. So let's return to Rachel's case for a minute. There's no doubt in most minds that her death was a homicide. She didn't stumble out to Devil's Gate on her own and die of exposure. Her torso was never found. There was no clothing, no belongings. The scene reads like a dump site, remote, chosen, deliberate. So who left her there? Using FBI victimology models and known patterns from the era, here's a likely profile. He's a male. In 1972, he was between 25 and 45. He's likely white. He's likely a truck driver, a salesman, a transient laborer, possibly ex-military. He's familiar with Nevada's backroads, particularly between Wells and Ely. He likely drove a van, a pickup, or a long-haul truck, something private, enclosed, and easy to clean. He would have had prior offenses, possibly sexual assault, indecent exposure, kidnapping attempts, or domestic abuse. His MO, lure, kill, and dump. He likely offered a ride, possibly killed her off-site, then transported her to Devil's Gate to reduce the chance of detection. And if he was methodical, mobile, and practiced, he probably didn't stop with Rachel. When we first examined Star Valley Jane Doe's case, the suspect list was sprawling. Known serial killers, suspected long-haul truckers, all kinds of shitheads, local one-offs, and even a few names thrown in for eerie coincidence. But now, as we turn to Devil's Gate, it's time to refocus. The pattern here isn't identical. The violence is colder, the disposal more deliberate. And what we learned from Devil's Gate might reframe everything that we thought we knew about the others. Some suspects no longer fit. Others still linger. And a few new names rise to the shadows. So the suspects that we're now going to discard are our good buddy, Theodore Robert the Shithead Bundy. He's eliminated. Despite the well-known VW Beetle link, Bundy had no confirmed murders before 74. FBI case files rule him out for the 72 Nevada activity. His MO of bludgeoning and forested areas, followed by necrophilia, is fundamentally at odds with the remote desert dismemberment at Devil's Gate. Next shithead that we can get rid of is Keith Jesperson, or the Happy Face Killer. He was far too young for this crime, only 17 in 1972. Jesperson's confirmed killings didn't begin until 1990, and while he later became a long-haul trucker familiar with the region, his known MO of strangulation, post-mortem staging doesn't match Devil's Gate. We can also get rid of the douchebag Gary Ridgway. Ridgway stayed in Washington, like we talked about in the Star Valley case. His presence for water-adjacent sites, strangulation, and high-risk sex worker victims doesn't translate to the isolated canyon near Wells. We can also get rid of your favorite douchebag, Robert Ben Rhodes.
Oh, yeah. My favorite.
He's just so sexy.
Oh, man.
Rhodes's truck-based torture chamber killings began in the 1980s. In 72, his activity is unconfirmed. His signature captivity-based murders with sadistic elements just don't line up with Rachel's disposal or dismemberment. We can also get rid of Scott William Cox. There's a very weak geographic and temporal fit. If you remember from the Star Valley case, he focused his attention on bars, and he was centered in Oregon, so there's a lack of a Nevada connection. No firearm use, no body found in a location like Devil's Gate. It just, no match. Howell Williams, we can get rid of that piece of shit too. His known murder involved his wife in Utah. His profile suggests personal motive killings, not opportunistic or predatory stranger abductions. We can also get rid of this douchebag, Harvey Carrington. Ruled out by method and distance. While active in the early 70s, his bludgeoning MO, preference for urban settings, and lack of Nevada ties just make him a poor fit. He's the douchebag that ran ads for people.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? The one ad killer?
Yeah.
That's that douchebag. So we never have to talk about those asshats again. At least not for a while. But
I was like, never again? I doubt it.
the one that the couple of them that we absolutely can't get rid of, unfortunately, because I'd like to get rid of this son of a bitch, and that's Del Wayne Eaton. He's still viable and growing stronger with every case that we talk about. Eaton was in the Elko region in the 1970s. His later behavior, abduction, prolonged captivity, remote desert disposal, resonates eerily with Devil's Gate. While his confirmed killings came later, the geographic behavioral alignment keeps him front and center. His age fits perfectly. Everything about this son of a bitch fits perfectly. And Another one that's still in play is Clark Perry Baldwin. And you remember he's the asshat that's on his way back here, or is probably in Wyoming now to stand trial. Though his known victims were found in the 1990s, Baldwin was in his 20s in 72, operating along I-80 and I-90. His known preference for transient female victims, remote dumping sites, and use of over-the-road trucking strengthens his candidacy. Also in play, obviously, is an unknown Great Basin serial killer. When you map the unsolved female homicides across the rural West, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, between 70 and 85, the consistencies pile up. Nude or partially clothed, no ID, found in canyons, ravines, ditches, no robbery, no known link to the victim. Devil's Gate fits that pattern almost too well. And then a local one-off killer is still plausible. There's always the chance that Rachel met someone not part of a broader pattern, someone local, opportunistic, whose motives was rage, impulse, or shame. The dismemberment or the possible dismemberment would complicate this, but it can't be dismissed outright. And then we have some new asshats to add to the mix.
Marvelous.
Which is always exciting.
Asshat roll call. Let's go.
So we got Bobby Jack Fowler. He's a very strong candidate. Fowler was violently active across Nevada, Oregon, and British Columbia throughout the 1970s and 1980s. He targeted hitchhikers, used blunt force or strangulation, and dumped his victims in isolated areas. His criminal history includes sexual assault, attempted abduction, and transient movement through this corridor. Devil's Gate fits him in ways that Star Valley didn't fully expose. Then we have a couple of my favorite douchebags. Gerald and Charlene Gallego. Are you familiar with these ass clowns?
No.
Also known as the sex slave murders, this bitch assisted him.
There's far too many of those kinds of couples out there.
Yeah. So this is a new inclusion based on proximity and escalation theory. Though known for kidnapping pairs of women for sexual slavery and murder from 78 to 80, Gallego operated extensively in Nevada and Northern California. He was convicted in Reno and Lovelock, both 300 miles from Devil's Gate. Some theorize early attempts before his known crimes may explain, and that may explain lone victims like Rachel. And another one that's new to the mix is the douchebag known as Wayne Nance, or the Missoula Mauler. Though primarily linked to Montana home invasions, Nance's early timeline, active as early as 1974, includes large gaps. His travel across the Northwest remains speculative, but not impossible. His varied MO makes him adaptable, and investigators have considered him in other unsolved cases with sexual violence and body concealment. So we narrow the lens, not to find an answer, but to ask better questions. The suspects we discard weren't less monstrous, just mismatched. The ones who remain carry threads of Rachel's case in their history, in the way they move, the way they hunt, and the places they leave behind. And the ones that we've added, they're here because something in Rachel's story echoes through theirs. Next, let's dive into the new suspects and the old ones that we are still looking at and see if any may have cross paths with Rachel and may still hold secrets in silence. So here's where it gets darker. When you overlay timelines, locations, and victim types, Rachel's case may not just resemble others, it may be part of a hidden string. So let's talk about Gerald and Charlene Gallego.
Your favorite couple?
As much as we want to. So they were active from 72 to 80. They have over 10 plus confirmed victims. They would abduct young women, often in pairs, rape and murder them. And they operated in Sacramento, in Reno, and in Lovelock, and who the hell else knows where else.
Yeah.
So this lovely pair would prowl malls, parking lots, roadside stops using a white van. They operated within a 300-mile radius of where Rachel was found. While their known MO focused on pairs of victims, serial killers do not always start that way. A solo attack or an early kill outside their pattern is very possible. Rachel's age, isolation, and vulnerability match the victim profile. A solo kill in 1972 may have been a test run or an early attempt.
Yeah, well, they're trying to find themselves.
Exactly. Then we've got Bobby Jack Fowler. He was active between the 1970s and 1996. His confirmed victims are 3 or just over 3, but he's suspected in dozens others. So his method was strangulation, bludgeoning, and sexual assault, and his regions were Oregon, Nevada, British Columbia, California, and Texas. So Fowler was a known drifter. He traveled for construction work, stayed in cheap motels, and targeted women who hitched rides, particularly from bars or roadside towns. He was violent, erratic, and hard to trace. He was finally linked to Canadian murders using DNA decades later. So his relevance here is that he had ties to Nevada and he lived transiently. His behavior and victim type closely align with Rachel's situation. If he was working in the region in 72, and that's possible, Rachel could have been one of his earliest kills. Next, we have Wayne Nance, the Missoula Mauler. He was active from 74 to 86. He's confirmed at least six victims, and he used varied methods: home invasions, abduction, assault. His regions were primarily in Montana, but he's suspected to have traveled to Idaho, possibly even into Nevada. Nance was charismatic and highly manipulative. His methods varied, but his targets were often young women. There's no confirmed link to Nevada, but his movement across the Northwest U.S. leaves gaps in the early 70s. So his relevance is his absence from confirmed activity in 72 and 73 raises questions. It's thin, but it's possible. And then we have the theorized Great Basin serial killer. Investigators and researchers, including those analyzing NamUs and unsolved case patterns, believe that several Jane Doe cases may be linked to an unidentified serial killer or a cluster of killers operating in the rural West between 75 and 90. I would extend that to, say, 1970 to 1990, something like that. I mean, that is what this whole season is about, is looking at this possibility. So the victim traits include young adult or, early teenage women found in rural, remote locations, signs of sexual assault or removal of personal items, often found nude or partially clothed, commonly lacking identification, and many remain unidentified. And then we have one of my favorite douchebags, and that is Dale Wayne Eaton. And I mean, the more I dig into this son of a bitch, the more I become convinced that he is linked to many cases.
Well, I discovered you don't hate him any less the more you...
I most certainly do not. I mean, I really want the son of a bitch to die, but I wish that he'd give up some information before he goes.
Yeah. But now, could we even trust it?
No. So, among all the names whispered in cold case circles, one reoccurs when we look west towards the Great Basin. A man with roots in Wyoming, but patterns that stretch far beyond it. The douchebag himself, Dale Wayne Eaton. He's convicted of kidnapping, rape, and the 1988 murder of Lisa Marie Kimmel in Wyoming. Eaton was arrested in 1997 and later sentenced to death, but law enforcement and independent researchers believe his trail began earlier and extended deeper into Nevada. So here's what ties him to the region and potentially to Jane Doe's like Rachel. In the 1970s through the early 1990s, Delwayne Eaton lived an alternate life. His known residential and employment history places him throughout Wyoming, Utah, and northern Nevada and parts of Idaho, right inside the corridor that threads Star Valley, Thousand Springs, and Devil's Gate. He worked transient jobs, manual labor, auto salvage, roadside maintenance. He was a welder. And he often worked under the table, so there's not any records that we can trace. He traveled extensively, often alone, and reportedly knew both US 93 and I-80 well. We know for a fact the son of a bitch knew the Elko County area very well and spent a considerable amount of time there. So White Pine County, where Shafter Jane Doe was found, that's another one that we're going to be talking about, is directly connected by rail and road to Eaton's known Wyoming addresses. His capacity to navigate isolated dump sites like the remote gravel roads near Shafter and Devil's Gate mirrors what we know of Lisa Kimmel's case. Abduction along a highway, sexual assault, transport across state lines, remote concealed disposal. Star Valley Jane Doe, the one we talked about last time, was a white female in her late teens to early 20s, 1972, shot in the head. She was located in an isolated ranching area near Star Valley in Elko County. Eaton has ties to Elko County in the early 1970s. Researchers note that Star Valley Jane Doe's murder, execution style, left in a secluded area, follows a pattern familiar to Eaton's known crimes: lethal force, disregard for remains, seclusion, and strategic distance from traffic corridors. The time frame overlaps with Eaton's suspected early criminal activity prior to his first documented violent arrest. We have the Shafter Jane Doe, and this one we'll get into, but she's a little bit farther away because this was in 93. Her cause of death was homicide. She was buried near Shafter Siding in White Pine County, just off of US 93. By 93, Eaton was still active and mobile. The Shafter site sits along a rail access point, a detail noteworthy because Eaton had rail and salvage experience. She was buried in a shallow grave, a method that Eaton would later use. Like Rachel and Star Valley Jane Doe, she had no ID, no personal belongings, and no missing person matches. This was not random. It was controlled, intentional, and quietly brutal. And this is what hit me in the face this week as I was researching this son of a bitch, and that is he had ties to the Elko County area of Nevada in the early 70s, 72, 73, 74, where we have, as we're going through these, you will see we have just a cluster of dead girls matching this profile around Elko County. And then he moves his sorry ass back to Wyoming, and all of a sudden we have no more Jane Does popping up in Elko County. Instead, we get the murder of Lisa Marie Kimmel, which we know he did in Natrona County, Wyoming. Oh, but then it gets even better because then his uncle's son, and it's confusing why it's described that way. I'm not entirely sure, but every source calls it his uncle's son instead of his cousin.
Maybe his cousin disowned him.
So I don't know for sure why that would be, unless they weren't at all related. It was like a somehow through marriage type thing or something. I don't know.
Marriage is still cousin, though. I don't know.
So his uncle's son, whatever, a kid by the name of Billy, says that after he had killed Lisa Marie Kimmel, of course, Billy didn't know he'd killed him or killed her, but at that time period, him and douchebag Eaton then took off and went to Salt Lake, and then ended up in the Elko County area just around 1993, right when Shafter Jane Doe pops up. So we haven't had any Jane Does in the Elko County, that area of Nevada, ever since this piece of shit left. And then when we do have another one pop up years later in 1993, it just so happens that this son of a bitch can be put right back in that same area. That's why I say the more I dig into this bastard, the more it just seems very probable that he was involved in this. And as you'll see, because we're going to be talking about this asshat throughout, every place he goes is surrounded by clusters of dead young women.
Yeah.
So Eaton's known behaviors. What's that?
He's a plague.
He is a plague. And I mean, it's difficult. The hard part that I have in building a profile for this son of a bitch is I have my own suspicions about, I just explained a lot of my suspicions about this son of a bitch, but he's only confirmed to have killed 2 people.
Yeah.
One, I guess I can't even say that, I guess, because he was convicted of killing Lisa Marie Kimmel, but he was acquitted for stabbing his cellmate to death, which he almost certainly did, but he was acquitted for it. So take that for what it's worth. I guess technically we can't even say 2. Technically, it's 1. It's hard to build a profile with just 1, but when you look at Lisa's case, it's impossible to believe that that was his first. And when we get to it, you'll all understand why that is. But it's impossible to believe that that was his first. Anyway, so his known behaviors before and after his confirmed murder aligns with traits seen in multiple Jane Doe cases in the Nevada high desert. Targeted young women traveling alone, approached victims at isolated stops or roadside services. He kept trophies. In Kimmel's case, he kept her freaking car, along with several other items. He chose dump sites with topographical protection, canyons, ravines, rail spurs, rivers, bridges. He avoided detection for decades due to his remote living style and weak paper trail, and I think that that by itself is proof positive that Lisa was not his first victim. So what stands out is his geographic consistency. Like I said, I just kind of got on a soapbox about it, but all through locations, Star Valley, Shafter, and Devil's Gate exist in or adjacent to areas Eaton was known or suspected to have passed through repeatedly. And he wasn't a drifter without purpose. He knew the land. We've talked about it in both Star Valley's case and now in Devil's Gate's case, that whoever got to these locations almost really needed to be a local or somebody that scouted the area first. Well, this son of a bitch meets both of those requirements. He wasn't really a local. He's a transient, but he had spent enough time in the area that he would know these back roads. We know the piece of shit would go off, not hiking. He's a fat, worthless bastard. He would go off camping in secluded areas.
Didn't he have family there?
He had definitely had family in the Elko area, which he stayed with in the 70s, which would explain his deviation from the Lisa Marie Kimmel's case. Again, I know it's hard to talk about these cases we haven't covered yet, but Lisa was held for like 7 days at his Manita property. And, you know, these cases likely deviate from that. We don't know. We have no way of knowing whether they were held or not. But it would have just been a matter of convenience. If he was living with family, he wouldn't have had a place to keep them. So
didn't he have a storage unit in Elko? Or am I mixing somebody else up?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, then I must be mixing somebody else up.
This piece of shit didn't really have anything that you would have to pay to have.
Okay.
because, I mean, he was as worthless as tits on a board, this guy. I mean, you know, so during 1972, he was married to Melody, his wife, and he would have been providing the main support. And I mean, they sound like a lovely couple, by the way. It's noted that she beat the piss out of him on a regular basis, which kind of makes me like the woman, honestly. But he was all over the place. He had it so just a little bit. We're gonna have to cover him in depth in an episode, but just a little bit is he tried to burn his house down when he was a kid, but only after his mom tried to burn it down. She was a crazy bitch. And then he tried to burn it down because he didn't want to, I don't remember, he didn't want to move or some shit like that. So he got sent away to the reform school, Lookout Mountain.
So you think you burn your house down, you don't have to move?
I think that's what he said. Let's see. Yeah, he hated moving, and the one person who was supportive in his life, his mother, was crazy. His father was abusive, and so he tried to burn his house down and get sent away to Lookout School for boys, you know, and there he learned to weld. And he actually did really good in reform school. They should have just left his ass locked up, but instead he learned to weld. He developed a trade, and so he actually ran his own welding business. And if you don't know about welders, especially like oil-filled welders, they have their own truck with a welder on it, and they're just transient. They're out. I mean, they'll go out in the oil fields and drive around and weld their shit and all this kind of stuff. So even though he was married, it's very likely that he was out of touch with his wife for extended periods of time.
Okay. So it's the terrain that ties it together. The routes, the canyons, the silence. And Eaton, as we discussed, he moved in that silence.
As of 2025, no physical evidence definitively ties Eaton to these specific Jane Doe cases. There's no DNA from the remains of Rachel, Star Valley, or Shafter that has been matched to Eaton. Most 1970s forensic material is degraded or lost forever. Eaton remains silent about any additional victims. But the circumstantial alignment, the timeline, the location access, the behavioral overlap keeps him high on the suspect list. Multiple retired law enforcement officers from Nevada and Wyoming include Eaton in private case review files. Some referred to him quietly as, quote, a likely ghost trail suspect, end quote, leaving victims in counties where cases never cross jurisdictional lines. So could a genetic link surface? Possibly. If remains like Rachel's or Shafter Jane Doe's are recovered, familial DNA could connect them to Eaton's known genetic profile. Eaton's DNA does exist in CODIS. That's what put his sorry ass in prison. If samples are extracted and viable, a cross-check is possible. It's just not at all likely. And until that day, we rely on mapped behaviors, confirmed movements, and his capacity for concealed cruelty. So Dwayne Eaton isn't the only suspect in these cases, but his shadow stretches long across Nevada's dead zones. And if he did leave more victims behind, they still wait in silence for someone to trace the echo back to him. Among several others that we'll be talking about this season, these three cases link strongly to Devil's Gate's case. That's Star Valley, which we talked about last time. We already talked about that one. We have Thousand Springs, which I believe is our next case. And she was found, the Thousand Springs Jane Doe was found near Thousand Springs in northeastern Nevada off US 93. In 1974, her cause of death was blunt force trauma. She was a female, young adult. Her remains were skeletal, weathered, no clothing or ID recovered, and the case remains unsolved under review for serial pattern links. And as you read through these, it's just insane. It's like you're reading the same case over and over and over again.
Yeah, that sounds very too similar.
And then we've got the Shafter Jane Doe, which I talked about, found near Shafter Siding in White Pines County, Nevada, found on November 16th of 93. Her cause of death was homicide. The specific method was not publicly released. She was an adult female. Estimated age range varies by source. The body was discovered in a shallow grave near remote rail access. The case remains open. Suspected hitchhiker, transient, no ID despite a forensic sketch and reconstruction. So whether this is one killer or multiple adopting similar MOs, the pattern remains disturbing. So could we prove a connection today? Technically, yes, but practically, it's really freaking hard. Here's the breakdown. There's no known DNA that was preserved from Rachel's remains. Without her body or bone samples, we can't extract a profile. Many suspects are dead or never charged. Fowler died in prison. Nance was killed during a home invasion gone wrong. The Gallegos were both convicted. Our douchebag Eaton, from what I understand, he's had multiple strokes. You can't even talk to the dumb son of a bitch anymore. He doesn't even know what the hell's going on. So it's really hard this far away without a DNA connection. We're not getting confessions from these assholes. A huge number of them are dead or not able to speak. I mean, so 1970s evidence handling was inconsistent at best. Items were often stored improperly, contaminated, or destroyed. Any preserved samples may be degraded beyond use. However, if partial DNA was recovered, perhaps from her clothing or from an item not yet destroyed, or if familial DNA became available through genealogy tools like GEDmatch, it could reopen the door. A match could connect her to a family name or to a known suspect profile that's already in the system. So now we get to my percentages, which I know you've been dying to get to.
I love the percentages.
So the probability suspect breakdown, who's the most likely? I gotta put my favorite, the Peach, Dale Wayne Eaton, right at the top of the list at 40%. We have confirmed Elko presence. So all the rest, everybody else that we talk about may have been in the Nevada area, might have been in the Elko area.
He definitely.
We know this son of a bitch was more than once. So we've confirmed his presence there. We've confirmed that he likes remote disposal sites. That's his MO. Matched age, timeline. He fits the escalation pattern and most behavioral and geographic alignment of all of the potential suspects. And, you know, keep in mind, we mentioned that there might not have been a location for him to keep victims, but that also could have been a progression for him. Mm-hmm. Serial killers don't start where they end.
Yeah.
You know, he could have started just by kidnapping and murdering women, and then that wasn't doing it for him anymore, so he decided he needed to keep them and torture them for longer periods of time. Next, the next most likely is Bobby Jack Fowler. I put him at 25%. His transient targeting victim type fit, but there's no confirmed Elko presence or dismemberment as part of his MO. Then we have Clark Perry Baldwin. I put him at 15%. His trucker routes match. He's suspected in other I-80 cases. 1970s activity is plausible, but it's unconfirmed. Gerald Gallego, I put it at 10%. He has a known Nevada presence in Reno and Lovelock, and he could have began earlier. His method of paired abductions doesn't match Rachel. And then we have Wayne Nance. I put him at 5%. The timeline is plausible. Geographic link is speculative, and his MO doesn't totally align. And then a loner local killer is possible, but unverified. The possible dismemberment and concealment suggests somebody with experience. And then a random one-off, I put it at 2%, and that's unlikely given concealment methods and the possible linkage to other similar cases.
So when we pull back, Rachel might not be just a Jane Doe. She might be part of a much larger map, one that no one noticed in time to stop it.
Exactly. Her story echoes through the bones of other women. Some found, some not. Some identified, many still buried without a name. The details shift, but the pattern repeats. Young women, isolated places, a killer who knows the terrain, and a system that didn't connect the dots. Rachel's death wasn't random. It's part of a thread we're only now starting to trace. And that thread might lead back to justice, not just for her, but for all the women left behind in the Great Basin silence. It's easy to believe that Rachel's story ended the day her remains were discovered, that the sand and the wind of Nevada erased her presence, buried it beneath the weight of time that no one remembers. But memory doesn't give in that easily. It lingers in people, in questions left unanswered, and in the ache of not knowing. Pain doesn't evaporate. Justice delayed still haunts. And for every Jane Doe, there's an absence where a life should have bloomed. Rachel had no funeral, no obituary, no stone carved with her name, but she's still here. And more importantly, people care. Ordinary people, students, artists, listeners, volunteers. They won't let her fade into the background of a forgotten file drawer. They won't let her become just another cold case statistic. After Rachel's body was discovered in 72 near Devil's Gate, her remains were buried in a pauper's grave, an unadorned county plot near Elko. It was protocol at the time. There was no family to claim her, no ceremony, no priest, no rabbi, no final words, just county staff, a rusted metal tag. The grave was marked only with Jane Doe 1972, a placeholder in place of a name, a number for a life. The small metal plate rusted in the mid-1980s and disappeared by the 1990s. Her resting place today is unmarked. Grass grows there. Gravel crunches under indifferent shoes. No one visits because no one knows where to go.
That haunts me. Someone was buried, laid to rest, without a name, without any words to honor who they were, just a number, as if her life had never mattered. But it did, and people are remembering her now.
In the early 2000s, Rachel's story stirred again, not from a cold case unit or new evidence, but from strangers online. NamUs volunteers tried to reconstruct her profile. The entry wasn't complete. No photo, no dental chart, but it existed. Coordinates, phone inventory, a case number, a spark in the darkness. Then came the digital sleuths. A thread appeared on Reddit in 2012 titled, "Unidentified Girl Found in Elko, 1972. Anyone recognize her?" It gained traction fast. Theories poured in, some helpful, others wild, but the thread kept her name alive. In 2015, a true crime blogger dubbed her, quote, "the Desert Whisperer." That phrase caught on. Web Sleuths launched a 300-comment thread in 2018 dedicated solely to her. Users compared dozens of missing person profiles from the Pacific Northwest, Utah, and California. None panned out, but still, they looked. Eyes turned back to Rachel, and those eyes brought others. By 2020, students from the Great Basin College hosted a candlelit vigil. They stood near Devil's Gate holding signs that said, "She mattered, still waiting." and not forgotten. Ask anyone who studied this case. It stays with you. Or if you're freaking demented like me, it worms its way into your brain and then it refuses to leave. A forensic artist who recreated her face in 2021 wrote in her blog, quote, "There's a loneliness in her features. I know that's projection, but I feel it when I draw her. She didn't choose silence. Someone forced it on her," end quote. A retired Elko deputy, now in his 80s, still keeps a photocopy of her file in a box in his attic. He spoke anonymously in a local article in 1999, saying, quote, "We never knew who she was, but I hoped someone out there would. I didn't want her to vanish twice," end quote. It's not just another file to them. It's a ghost that never left. It's a voice they couldn't hear, trying to speak through evidence that disintegrated with the desert wind. In 2025, Dark Dialogue listeners adopted Rachel's case through the Adopt a Victim initiative. The idea was simple. If the system can't do it, we will. Every listener becomes a researcher, an advocate, a custodian of her memory. There's no law degree required, no badges necessary. Volunteers can file FOIA requests for Elko County's 1970 records. They can track missing girls from Idaho and Utah. Others can interview locals, retired deputies, funeral home workers, old-timers who might have heard whispers. They can scan yearbooks, compare forensic reconstructions to runaway reports. We launched this program and our dedicated Discord servers, and on that server, you can talk about the case. You can compare notes. We can all come together and we can give voices to these voiceless victims.
It's not just about solving a mystery. It's about restoring dignity. Rachel didn't get that when she died, but she's getting it now.
Rachel's case has made its way into Nevada University classrooms. In criminal justice and forensic anthropology courses, she's used as a case study in evidence degradation and forensic sketch limitations, cold case reinvestigation strategies, case-based and gender-based barriers to justice, chain of custody failures in rural jurisdiction. Instructors ask students, what would you have done differently? Or how would you find her family now? Her story now appears in the Nevada Cold Case Digital Archive, the University of Nevada's traveling art exhibit, Unclaimed Faces, the National Museum display, Unclaimed, the Forgotten Women of the West. Tens of thousands of students, museum goers, and researchers have now seen her. They've read about her silence and they've spoken her name aloud. Rachel's case is over 50 years old, and yet it still matters, because as long as women keep vanishing, as long as victims are buried, unnamed, as long as cases are dismissed as unsolvable, we have a duty to say, not this one. Rachel may not have been found in time, but she's being seen now. And that visibility, that recognition, isn't just symbolic, it's essential. If she were your daughter, wouldn't you want her remembered? Someone, somewhere, might still know her. A cousin, a school friend, a childhood neighbor, someone who's wondered for 50 years why she never came back. They just haven't seen her face in the right place yet.
Rachel lived without fanfare, and she died without a name. But she's gained something rare, a legacy built not by institutions, but by strangers who cared.
Here at Dark Dialogue, we don't chase headlines. We don't tell these stories for fame or finality. We tell them because unfinished stories still have power. Rachel's story isn't done. Not yet. And maybe if we keep saying her name, if we keep lighting these small fires, someone, somewhere, will remember the rest. Her name might not be Rachel, but we gave her that name because a number just isn't enough. A file tag, a skeletal report, a case number, those are for evidence, for process, but she was a person. She may have had a favorite song. She may have painted her nails with friends or curled her hair for prom. Maybe she held hands in the back seat of a car or watched lightning flicker over a desert storm. She lived, she laughed, she cried, she hoped. She deserved more time and a gentler end. We don't know where she was going. Was she heading home, escaping something? Was she scared, angry? Was she numb by the time the world turned its back? We may never know those final truths, but this we do know. She mattered. And that truth can't be buried. That's our stand. Quiet, stubborn, unyielding. Jane Doe sounds clinical, neutral, objective, but anonymity carries weight. It means no one came forward. No hand waved a photograph. No mother begged for headlines. No one stood in a morgue and said, "That's her." But it doesn't mean that she was unloved. It means she was unseen. It means the systems built to notice didn't. It means society looked the other way, too hurried, too overwhelmed, too willing to dismiss a girl from nowhere who wasn't expected to make headlines. But every life matters. And so we say again, you matter, Rachel. You always did, and you still do. Time doesn't always bring answers, but it leaves traces, faint echoes in the people who still wonder. Maybe a mother somewhere still sets a place at holidays. Maybe she reads old letters, half believing one more will arrive. Maybe she tucks a photo into her purse every day, just in case. A childhood friend might glance at a yearbook and pause at a blank space. A cousin might remember shared summers, barefoot on gravel, laughing under stars. Maybe someone listening right now holds the key. A memory they thought didn't matter. A girl they met once at a rest stop or rode with for 10 miles. A voice that haunts them when they drive past sagebrush. And maybe they're ready to speak. That's what hope looks like in cold cases. Not courtrooms, not full confessions, just a spark, a shard of truth, a name for a grave. We stood where she's buried once, in Elko County's pauper's grave. No flowers, no stone, no words, just wind whispering over dirt, an open, aching silence. And yet, she's not alone anymore, because now people remember. Strangers light candles for her in kitchens. College students visit the canyon where she was found and leave wildflowers. Artists sketch her again and again, trying to breathe life into the outlines of bone. And across the world, listeners whisper 4 simple words. We see you, Rachel. Some ask, why bother? Why care about a girl from 1972 whose name we don't even know? But caring doesn't require a reason. Compassion doesn't need credentials. You don't need a badge to search. You don't need a degree to remember. You just need a heart. In a world so quick to forget, choosing to care is a radical act. It's easy to chase headlines, solve for fame, or abandon a case when it grows cold. But to keep digging, not for praise, not for credit, but because it's right, that's what we call courage. We say her name not for performance, but for principle. Because remembering the forgotten might be the holiest act we ever do. Our pledge to Rachel, to every Jane and John Doe, to every soul left without a name, we won't stop speaking for you. Even if the records are lost, even if the trail is gone cold, even if no one in power is listening, we will. We'll say your name even if it's borrowed. We'll tell your story even if it's incomplete. We'll carry your memory even if the world tried to throw it away. Because anonymity is a kind of death, but remembrance is defiance. Some may think her story ends in that desert, that she was lost and that's the whole of it. But that's not the truth. Her story didn't end with her death. It continues. Every time a stranger listens, every time a student adds her case to a research paper, every time a new tip lands in the inbox of a cold case detective, every time someone whispers, "I think I knew her," she changes us. She makes us question systems. She makes us wonder how many others are out there, forgotten. She teaches us about silence and the power of breaking it. Her echo stretches far past Elko County. It rings in cities and in farms, in classrooms and in courtrooms. It rings in anyone who has ever felt invisible, anyone who has ever been told that they don't matter. Rachel matters, and the truth has legs. It moves, it speaks, it survives. At Dark Dialogue, we've carried Rachel's story with care. Not as a headline, not as a case file, but as a promise that no one is too forgotten to be remembered, that no story is too quiet to be heard. We tell these stories not to bring closure, but to hold space for what was lost, to hold grief and hope in the same breath, to remind each other that someone, somewhere, still cares. Wherever you are, Rachel, we see you. We remember you. We keep searching, and we won't stop, because even the faintest voice deserves to be heard, even if it's only an echo carried by the wind across the canyon. So we've walked the canyon, we've heard Rachel's whisper, and we've stared into the silence that her killer left behind. A single act of violence stole her name, her story, and her chance at justice. But tonight, we pushed back, because a woman discarded in the desert deserves more than a file number. She deserves a reckoning. This isn't the end of her story. It's only the beginning of what we can still do.
If this case moved you, if you felt the weight of Rachel's silence, don't let it sit. Pick it up. Carry it forward. We're asking you to adopt her case, not just in memory, but in action.
Join our Adoptive Victim Program at www.darkdialogue.com. There you'll find detailed case files, local archives, and a growing community of citizen sleuths. Dive into our Rachel, Devil's Gate Jane Doe channel on Discord and help share her story. Hunt for missing links or submit your own theories.
Visit the Dark Dialogue blog for deep dives into each victim's case. Rachel has her own post waiting for you with maps, timelines, and more at www.darkdialogue.com. You can also support our work directly. Every dollar helps us research, publish, and promote these forgotten stories. Get members-only perks, early access, and exclusive bonus content on Patreon, Coffee, and Dark Dialogue Crime at substack.com.
And please, like, follow, and review the show wherever you listen. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you tune in. It may seem small, but every follow, every share, every 5-star review helps amplify these victim stories, helps them reach the ears that might recognize a face, remember a clue, or finally speak a name.
So tell a friend, post a link, be the voice that reminds the world these women mattered.
You can catch our other shows too. Dark Dialogue main show, where we explore the darkest corners of true crime history, and Dark Dialogue Shadow Chat sessions are behind-the-scenes banter and case updates, because every story deserves its time. Sometimes you just gotta smile and have a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
And every life deserves remembrance, and every ghost deserves a reckoning. So remember, stay safe, keep searching, and make the guilty face the reckoning.